This bill to the House. Mr. Speaker.
In Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I hope that the National Party backbenchers were listening closely to their minister in that speech, and indeed he made the same comment in his first speech, because some of them seem to be labouring under the misapprehension that the money raised from these extra taxes that will be levied against middle and low-income New Zealanders will be used across the transport network. That's absolutely untrue, and the minister has made that clear. This is for roads, and in fact it's not even just for roads, or for roads broadly, sir. It is specifically for their uneconomic roads of national significance, roads of political significance, roads of vote-buying significance, as we found out by referencing the hollow men in the first reading, sir. So that's what's going on here, is that the National Party is putting new taxes and raising taxes on middle and low-income New Zealanders. And frankly, sir, I'm surprised that the Green Party and the Mana Party are voting to increase taxes, to increase costs for low and middle income New Zealanders. That, I think, is outrageous. And the Labour Party, over here in the Labour Party, we just won't wear that. We refuse to support an increase of taxes on low and middle income New Zealanders for transport infrastructure that simply does not stack up economically. Look, Mr. Speaker, there are a range of different... Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. I have a point of order which will be heard in silence.
Mr. Speaker, I can barely hear myself over David Bennett. If he could, I don't mind if he wants to interject on me. He's quite fond of it. But if he could just calm down a little bit, that would be helpful.
Order. Your point is well made. The noise was coming from both sides of the House. Will the member please continue?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The fact is there is a number of different aspects to a growth-focused transport network in New Zealand. Local roads are important. Highways, in some places, where appropriate, are important. Rail is important. Public transport, whether it be urban rail or buses, that's important too. So is active transport. Cycling and walking are both important as well. We need infrastructure to support all those modes of transport, but all this government is focused on is the roads of national significance. Now, what we know is that when a government builds more roads in order to relieve congestion, that is simply buying time, not a solution. It might last a few years, but in time, all we get are more cars on those roads, and in fact, we end up exactly where we started from with the congestion that we had before. Now, an investment in a diverse and integrated transport network would see people moving from being single occupants in cars who are travelling to work and back home again, moving to public transport. If the investment was there to make sure the public transport available was reliable and regular and fitted in with people's lives. But this government isn't interested in investing in that type of public transport. We would see freight taken off the road and relieving congestion, both for freight carriers and for drivers, for car drivers, if we saw more freight moving onto rail, and if we saw more freight moving on to coastal shipping. These are appropriate methods of moving freight around the country. Sometimes freight needs to be moved on a road. Sometimes freight needs to be moved on rail. Sometimes freight needs to be moved by coastal shipping. So, there are different time dependencies, there are different types of freight, and what this government is doing is not building a transport network that responds to the different needs of different users and different types of freight and different time dependencies. It's investing everything into roads. And actually what it's doing is over-capitalising in the roading network when what would be a smarter use of capital is to have a broader transport network so that the peak times on the roads were relieved a little bit, and that we weren't investing loads of capital in having empty roads most of the time. I appreciate congestion is appalling in Auckland, but most of the time those motorways are empty. So why spend billions of dollars on building roads that are going to be empty most of the time? There is a smarter, more sustainable, more strategic way of using our transport money and investing in transport infrastructure. Absolutely. Buses and trains need to be used, but they relieve peak congestion. They relieve peak congestion. It's a smarter use of capital. And actually, I would like to hear that the National Party backbenchers are quite keen to interject, but they're not at all keen to actually offer a substantive argument when they get their calls. So I'd be quite keen to hear a little bit more than just the one-liners that they've been provided by their research team. I'd actually like to hear them provide a more sensible, substantive argument than what they've given so far. So if they want to argue in favour of pouring all the money into uneconomic roads, they should get up and argue for that. Let's hear the case for it. But they know there is no case for it, sir. They know there is no case for it. What this tax bill actually does is it continues National's legacy of shifting the burden of tax from those who can have the most ability to pay for it onto those who have the least ability to pay for it. And it comes from a misguided belief that reducing taxes on those who can afford to pay tax somehow creates jobs. That is an absolute fallacy, sir, that reducing tax on the extremely wealthy creates jobs. How many jobs did the $5,000 a week tax cut given to the CEO of Telecom create? None. Absolutely none. On the other hand, indeed, Telecom cut 1,500 jobs, probably to pay for the CEO's salary. But on the other hand, giving tax relief to middle and low income earners, that is a job creation strategy, because it is consumers that create jobs, sir. It is consumers that create jobs. When businesses create jobs, when there is demand for their products and the demand is high enough that they need to take on additional labour to meet that demand. And demand comes from people having enough money in their back pockets to actually be able to go to the supermarket, to the shops, to the computer store, to wherever, and purchase products. That is where job creation comes from, sir. And this government is labouring again under a complete fallacy. And that is why its taxation and economic policies are absolutely wrong. And that is why we are not seeing job growth. We're not seeing the 170,000 promised jobs, just another broken promise from the National Party. We are not seeing the economic growth that would actually get the books back into surplus without having to increase taxes and dive down the back of the couch and find every single little penny that can be found to try and get the government's books back into that tiniest of tiny surpluses, 1/1000th of the overall government books. So that is well within anybody's margin of error. The slightest little hiccup between now and next financial year and that surplus is completely gone. But the government could be getting there if they had policy settings that encouraged job growth. The kind of policy settings that the Labour Party has, sir. A capital gains tax to shift investment away from speculative investment in property towards the productive sector that creates jobs. A procurement policy that supports New Zealand businesses and New Zealand jobs, sir. Research and development tax credits that again support the productive sector, the sector that creates jobs. Sir, those policies and others are the kinds of things New Zealanders need to see from this government, not penny-pinching increases to their fuel excise tax just to make up for the fact that this government has had unaffordable tax cuts for the wealthy and has an unaffordable program of road building for roads that are completely uneconomic. I suggest that the National Party members who reckon they represent the provinces go and speak to some of the mayors and the councillors in those provinces and talk to them about their concerns about local roads, sir. Because this government is reviewing the way it funds local roads. And I suggest that the member for Wairarapa go and talk to Rolly Ellis at the Taurua District Council, who is deeply concerned that the forestry that is about to come online in his region is not going to be, the productivity for that is not going to be as high as it could be because of the lack of investment in their local roads, because the government won't support them to upgrade their local roads roads, because all the money is going to the roads of national significance. That's the truth here. That's the truth. This government doesn't support the regions. This government doesn't actually support roads, and it doesn't support an integrated transport network. It supports buying votes by building uneconomic, gold-plated, silly roads that are significant to the National Party only and not to the hard-working people of New Zealand.
David Bennett.
Mr Speaker, I think the Labor Party needs to take stock of that meeting.